Stop for a moment, my child, and do not let your attention wander even for a second, because what is being placed before you now is not ordinary, and it is not arriving by accident. There are moments when I speak softly, and there are moments when I interrupt the flow of your day because what I must say cannot wait behind distractions, cannot remain hidden beneath noise, and cannot be delayed one moment longer. This is one of those moments. I am calling you to pause because something that has remained sealed, protected, and untouched for longer than you understand is now standing at the edge of release. What I am about to reveal did not begin today. It began long before this hour, long before your recent tears, long before the nights when you looked upward asking whether I still remembered what you placed before me in prayer. I have watched you continue while carrying questions you never spoke aloud to anyone else. I have seen how you kept walking even when your strength felt reduced, how you continued speaking faith even while uncertainty moved quietly inside you. And now I tell you clearly that this moment is not small. This is a divine interruption because what has been held back can no longer remain hidden. You thought some things had disappeared because time passed without visible movement. You thought perhaps what you asked for had been lost among many other prayers, or delayed so long that perhaps it no longer belonged to your future. But listen carefully, because I want you to understand this deeply. What you cried for was never discarded, never misplaced, never forgotten. What you believed had become silence was not absence. It was protection. I did not lose what concerned you. I did not set it aside carelessly. I kept it untouched. I guarded it where disappointment could not stain it, where fear could not damage it, where the wrong season could not weaken what I intended to remain whole until the exact moment you could receive it. There were times you interpreted delay as refusal because your eyes searched for movement and found none, yet all along there was movement beyond what you could measure. What I withheld was not withheld in anger. It was preserved with precision because not every blessing survives early exposure, and not every answer remains strong when released into a season that cannot carry its weight. There comes a moment, my child, when waiting reaches its boundary. There comes a point where what has remained reserved begins to move because the appointed second has arrived, and I tell you now with certainty that such a moment is before you. Heaven does not operate by human frustration, nor by visible clocks. Yet there is a timing that I establish with complete wisdom, and when that timing reaches fullness, what seemed motionless suddenly begins to shift. You have known long periods where nothing appeared to change, where one day resembled another, where hope had to survive without evidence. But this is not that same hour. The atmosphere around you is not what it was before. Something has matured beneath the surface. Something has aligned that could not align sooner. What could not happen months ago can happen now because there are seasons where I prepare the gift, and there are seasons where I prepare the one who will hold it. Often you asked why you had to remain in stillness while others seemed to move ahead, but what I was building in hidden places required patience you did not fully understand while living through it. Now the season that trained you is not the season that defines what comes next. Do not move past what I am saying now as though it were ordinary encouragement, because the final words I place within your spirit in this hour carry answers connected to prayers you spoke when no one else was listening. Some prayers were whispered so quietly that even you wondered whether they counted. Some were formed only as tears because language failed you. Some rose from nights when exhaustion covered your thoughts and you no longer had strength to explain what hurt. Yet nothing spoken before me was ever empty. Every hidden cry reached me fully. Every silent ache remained known. This is why I call your attention strongly now, because there are answers you have sought in fragments that I am bringing together in clarity. There are pieces you thought were separate that belong to one larger work I have been shaping all along. If you listen only partially, you may hear comfort but miss instruction. If you remain fully attentive, you will recognize why certain doors stayed closed, why some delays protected more than they postponed, and why the thing you feared was absent was actually being guarded for a more exact moment than you could yet understand. I did not protect this blessing from you, my child. I protected it for you until you became ready to hold it without losing yourself beneath its weight. There are gifts that appear beautiful from a distance, but require inward strength to carry once they arrive. Had I placed certain things in your hands earlier, they would have entered a version of you still healing, still unstable in ways you could not yet see, still vulnerable to voices that would have shaped how you received what was sacred. There were lessons hidden inside your waiting that were not punishment but preparation. You learned how to remain when easy answers did not appear. You learned how to trust beyond visible proof. You learned how to endure days when your emotions and your faith did not feel equal. What you call delay often became the place where endurance developed quietly, where discernment sharpened, where your dependence on immediate signs slowly weakened. And now what I guarded can approach because the person who once begged only for quick relief has grown in ways even you do not fully recognize yet. I know the hidden tears, the delayed answers, the silent nights, and the repeated moments when you looked at circumstances and wondered whether progress existed at all. I know the nights you finished the day carrying questions you did not voice because speaking them felt too painful. I know the mornings when you rose with effort because hope felt fragile. I know the private disappointments after believing something would happen and then watching another day pass unchanged. None of these moments escaped me. Not one tear fell unnoticed. Not one silent struggle disappeared into emptiness. Even when others around you saw only your outward strength, I saw where exhaustion pressed inwardly. Even when you smiled to keep peace around others, I knew where your spirit carried weight. This is why I speak with such tenderness now, because what is coming must be understood not merely as a reward after pain, but as a carefully guarded release shaped by all that you survived without fully understanding why you had to endure it. Say, I walk by faith, not sight. Lord, if you trust His unseen yet steady hand. Some things had to remain hidden because too many voices surrounded you. Some answers had to stay covered because if they had appeared earlier, fear would have spoken louder than faith. There were seasons where even your own thoughts could have damaged what I intended to bless. There were people near you who would not have understood what I was doing, and their doubt would have entered spaces I needed protected. Not every unfinished season was empty. Some were protective coverings around what had not yet reached maturity. You asked why certain opportunities disappeared, why some relationships shifted, why some expectations dissolved before becoming real. Yet often what looked like loss was simply removal of what could not accompany the thing I had reserved. When I guard something, I do not merely hide it from danger outside you. I also shield it from premature exposure inside you until clarity becomes stronger than fear. And now hear this clearly. Today what was closed in heaven begins moving toward your hands. Not because I suddenly remembered, but because the appointed measure has reached fullness. What remained sealed is beginning to open. What remains still is beginning to move. This does not always begin with noise. Often it begins quietly, with inward certainty, with unexpected peace, with subtle shifts you almost overlook if you are only searching for dramatic signs. But make no mistake, movement has begun. The waiting that shaped you is not wasted. The tears that softened you are not forgotten. The silence that taught you endurance is not meaningless. What I stored carefully. What I guarded completely. And what I now release comes not as accident, but as a precise answer shaped for this exact hour, this exact season, this exact version of you that can finally receive without collapsing beneath what once would have overwhelmed you. So remain attentive, because this opening is not merely about receiving something outward. It is about recognizing that I was present in every hidden stage before this release. The same hand that held it back is the hand that now brings it forward. The same wisdom that said wait now says receive. The same silence that once confused you now begins to explain itself. And as what was reserved approaches, let your heart not retreat into old fear. Let it stand steady, because what reaches you now comes through timing that cannot fail, protection that did not weaken, and love that never once forgot your name. My child, you have often measured silence as though silence meant distance, and you have looked at delay as though delay meant I had turned away from what mattered to you. But I want you to listen carefully now, because what you called abandonment was never abandonment, and what you called emptiness was never emptiness. There were many moments when you lifted your heart toward me and waited for an answer that did not arrive in the way you expected, and because the answer did not come quickly, you wondered whether heaven had become quiet toward you. You looked at the same circumstances day after day, and because nothing visible seemed to change, you assumed perhaps I had decided not to move, perhaps I had chosen silence over response, perhaps your tears had fallen without purpose. But my child, not one prayer spoken in exhaustion ever disappeared. Not one whisper made in weakness failed to reach me. Even the prayers you spoke when your faith felt tired, when your words were broken, when you repeated the same plea because you no longer knew how else to ask, every one of them was heard completely. I did not hear only the polished words you spoke when strength surrounded you. I also heard the trembling prayers spoken when your voice carried disappointment, confusion, and fatigue. I heard you when you prayed, and immediately wondered whether praying again made sense. I heard you when you asked with hope one day and with tears the next. I heard you when you stopped speaking aloud because you feared your own heart was becoming too tired to keep asking. Nothing about your weariness prevented me from listening. There were nights when you looked upward and said very little because disappointment had already spoken too loudly inside you. There were moments when you believed that if I intended to answer, surely something would have moved by now. You counted passing days, measured passing months, and quietly compared what you hoped for against what remained unchanged. In those hours, disappointment did not arrive suddenly. It settled little by little, like weight gathering where hope had once stood strong. You did not always lose faith openly. Sometimes you continued outwardly while inwardly wondering why nothing seemed to answer the urgency inside you. I saw those moments clearly. I saw when you smiled around others while privately asking why your waiting continued. I saw the effort it took to keep trusting when evidence remained absent. I saw how disappointment tried to convince you that silence meant refusal. Yet even in those moments when your emotions struggled against your faith, heaven had not stopped moving. What looked unmoving to you was often the hidden stage where fragile things were being preserved until they could emerge without being damaged by forces you could not yet see. What you interpreted as inactivity was often careful guarding, because some answers are too delicate to enter before the surrounding conditions are ready to hold them. You asked many times why certain things could not happen sooner. You looked at what you desired and thought it harmless to receive it immediately, yet what you saw only from the surface carried deeper weight than you understood. Some blessings appear simple when viewed through desire, but they carry layers that require preparation beneath them. Had some answers arrived when you first begged for them, They would have entered seasons where your spirit was still wounded in ways not yet healed, where your judgment was still influenced by pain you had not fully recognized, where your heart still leaned toward voices that would have shaped how you carried what I intended to bless. My child, early arrival does not always feel like harm in the beginning, but some things given before their season become burdens rather than blessings. A gift placed too early can be mishandled by fear, distorted by insecurity, weakened by surrounding influences, or attached to people who were never meant to touch what I prepared for you. There were times you asked for immediate release, while I saw that immediate release would place something precious inside unstable ground. And because I love you, I would not allow something sacred to be damaged merely to satisfy your urgency for immediate relief. Please support our channel. Our work is to bring happiness in your life and devotion to God. And if you want, you can donate to us via given link in description to show your support. You thought I was withholding love, but I was guarding destiny. What you called delay was not a closed hand of indifference. It was my hand covering something fragile until the right hour could protect its future. Love does not always answer quickly simply because pain asks quickly. Love also knows when speed creates damage. Love knows when what is desired must wait because the one receiving it is still becoming able to hold it well. Destiny is not built only by arrival. Often it is shaped by what happens before arrival. I knew what was connected to what you were asking for. I knew which people still surrounded you who could not remain once that answer came. I knew which attachments still held influence in your decisions. I knew which fears still whispered too loudly beneath your prayers. If I had placed everything in your hands when you first asked, you would have called it blessing, but later you would have discovered how much unseen danger surrounded what came too soon. So I preserved it. I kept it where impatience could not touch it, where wrong timing could not distort it, where hands not assigned to your future could not interfere with what belonged to you. You often believed nothing was happening because you searched for visible movement and found none. But not every holy work begins where eyes can measure it. There are seasons when I work beneath what you can observe, where roots deepen before branches appear, where structures are strengthened before doors open, where unseen alignment matters more than outward signs. In those hidden seasons, your waiting itself became part of what prepared you. The prayers you repeated taught endurance. The silence you endured taught discernment. The disappointment you survived taught you how to remain when immediate comfort did not arrive. You did not always understand that while you waited for one answer, I was reshaping many inner places that would later protect you from mishandling what you longed to receive. Waiting was not empty simply because it felt painful. Some of your deepest changes happened where you felt least rewarded. You learned how to continue when feelings shifted daily. You learned how to seek me without visible proof. You learned how to stay present even when certainty did not come easily. Painful seasons often carry hidden building, and much of what you now possess inwardly was formed when you thought nothing meaningful was occurring. There were also wrong people near your season, my child, and you did not fully recognize how deeply their presence could interfere with what I intended. Some individuals around you could celebrate your struggle because it asked little of them, but they would not have understood your next level of blessing. Some voices sounded supportive while quietly carrying doubt, jealousy, fear, or limitations that would have entered what I gave you if release had come too early. Not every person present in your delay was designed for your arrival. Sometimes delay itself exposed who remained only while things looked uncertain. Sometimes silence allowed false attachments to loosen before destiny moved closer. If certain blessings had appeared sooner, they would have been touched by hands, opinions, and expectations that had no place near what I reserve. So I allowed time to separate what did not belong. What felt like unnecessary waiting often became quiet protection from influence you had not fully discerned. There were also spiritual seasons you could not see clearly. Not every period carries equal readiness. There are times when even a true answer becomes heavy because the inner season is still recovering from previous battles. You prayed while carrying wounds from things you had barely named. You asked while still healing from disappointments that had altered how you trusted. You desired movement while inwardly still bracing for loss because previous pain taught you to fear disappointment even while praying against it. I saw where healing needed to deepen before arrival could become safe. I saw where peace needed to become stronger before increase arrived. What you wanted was not denied because you were forgotten. It was delayed because I understood the spiritual weather surrounding your life better than you could from within it. And I want you to know this clearly now. Your pain had meaning. Not because pain itself is my desire, but because I refuse to waste what you endure. The tears you shed while waiting were not meaningless tears falling into empty hours. The nights you almost gave up were not invisible to me. The moments when you said little because your strength felt thin were not moments I ignored. Even when you believed your endurance had no visible reward, I was marking every part of your journey. Your sorrow did not prove I was absent. Often it proved you were standing inside a process larger than you could yet interpret. Some chapters feel barren while they are actually carrying hidden preservation. Some silences feel cruel while they are protecting delicate outcomes from early exposure. What hurt you often taught you how deeply you still needed me beyond visible answers. What delayed you often prevented future sorrow greater than the sorrow of waiting. So when you look back, do not define those seasons only by what did not happen. See also what was preserved, what was prevented, what matured, what separated, what healed, what strengthened, and what remained untouched because I chose not to allow premature arrival. Delay was never rejection. Silence was never absence. Waiting was never proof that love had weakened. I was near every exhausted prayer, every repeated question, every hidden tear, every fragile hope. And where you feared nothing was happening, I was guarding what belonged to your future until both the blessing and your spirit could meet in a moment that would not break what I intended to build. My child, there are things you asked me for that you tried to define with earthly language because your heart could only describe what it knew. But what I was preserving for you was always larger than the words you used while praying. Many times you thought you were asking only for one answer, one open door, one clear breakthrough, one visible change that would finally prove something had moved. Yet while you named one need, I saw many connected needs hidden beneath it. When you asked for provision, I heard not only your desire for relief, but also your deeper longing for stability, peace, dignity, and freedom from the pressure that had quietly followed your thoughts. When you asked for one relationship to heal, I saw the places inside you still carrying old wounds that needed restoration before any true reconciliation could hold safely. When you asked for one opportunity, I saw how opportunity alone would not sustain you unless courage, clarity, timing, and protection arrived with it. This is why what I held in secret was never limited to one single answer. What remained hidden carried layers you could not yet fully imagine because heaven never prepares small fragments when I intend to move with fullness. I stored not only what you name, but what your spirit needed beyond what your words could form. Right, I adore you, Spirit of the living God, if the Holy Spirit is your daily guide. There were answers waiting that your present understanding could not fully picture. You imagined one kind of solution while I prepared something broader than your imagination could comfortably hold. Sometimes you thought the answer would arrive looking familiar, but what I stored did not always resemble the shape you expected. You asked for rescue from one burden while I prepared release from several burdens you had learned to carry so long that you no longer noticed how heavy they had become. You asked for one closed place to open, while I saw entire areas of your future needing alignment before one opening can safely appear. You asked for something immediate because pain makes urgency feel necessary, yet what I held involved timing, people, places, protection, and unseen adjustments that your eyes could not observe while waiting. My child, what I store for you is never random. It is precise. It is shaped with knowledge of everything around you and everything ahead of you. I do not gather blessings carelessly. I prepare them with full awareness of who you are becoming and what must surround that arrival so that what reaches you remains whole. Some of what I held back was peace, real peace, not merely the absence of conflict, but peace that enters your inner being with authority strong enough to silence fear where fear once ruled easily. You thought often that peace would come only after circumstances changed. Yet I tell you there were seasons when circumstances could not yet shift because first I was preserving a deeper peace meant to survive beyond circumstance. If I had released outward change before inward peace matured, you would still have carried turmoil into every answer. So I stored peace where panic could not reach it until the right hour would allow it to settle within you as something stronger than passing comfort. There is peace I prepared for you that does not tremble when voices around you change, peace that remains even when visible signs still seem incomplete, peace that steadies decisions, relationships, thoughts, and responses. This peace had to remain guarded until fear lost enough strength that peace could enter without being immediately driven out by old patterns of worry. Some of what I stored was restoration, because there were broken parts of your life that could not simply be patched quickly. Restoration is not the same as temporary relief. Restoration rebuilds what was damaged in ways stronger than before, and rebuilding often requires hidden work before visible return appears. There were losses you mourned openly and losses you never fully admitted even to yourself. There were moments where trust weakened, confidence faded, and hope withdrew quietly because disappointment repeated itself more than once. I saw every fracture, even those you learned to live around instead of healing. And because restoration carries delicate rebuilding, I did not place it where careless timing could break it again. I preserved restoration in hidden places until your spirit could receive without reopening the same wounds through fear. What I restore is not fragile when it reaches you, because I do not return things carelessly. I rebuild with depth, and depth often remains unseen until the appointed moment arrives. Some of what remained stored was vindication, because there were chapters where misunderstanding surrounded you, where silence became your only response while others formed conclusions without knowing what I knew. You wondered why I did not answer quickly when false assumptions moved around you, why I allowed certain judgments to remain unanswered, why some truth stayed hidden while you carried the weight of being misunderstood. But vindication released too early can stir pride, conflict, or reactions that disturb greater purposes. So I kept certain truths covered. I preserved what would one day speak clearly without requiring you to force explanation before its hour. Vindication does not always arrive through words. Sometimes it arrives through fruit, through time, through undeniable outcomes that speak more deeply than defense ever could. I kept your vindication in places where accusation could not distort it and where timing would reveal what human effort never could have established. Some of what I stored was healing, and not only healing for what others caused, but healing for wounds created by repeated delay itself. Waiting leaves marks when it lasts long enough. It teaches caution, but sometimes it also leaves fear hidden beneath hope. I saw how certain disappointments remained active inside you long after you stopped speaking about them. I saw how certain losses changed how quickly you trusted future possibilities. I saw where even while praying, part of you feared another disappointment might follow. So healing had to be prepared carefully, because healing given too lightly can remain shallow, while healing prepared deeply becomes lasting. I held healing where painful memories could not interrupt its formation until it could arrive with strength enough to touch places you had nearly accepted as permanently tender. And yes, my child, I also stored opportunity, but not merely the kind of opportunity the world notices first. I stored moments, alignments, introductions, decisions, timings, and openings that connect beyond what appears obvious. Some doors remain closed because betrayal was nearby. Some opportunities stayed hidden because people near you at the time would have touched what did not belong in their hands. Not every closed door was rejection. Some closed doors were protection from entering spaces where trust would have been misplaced, where motives around you were not clean, where what looked promising carried unseen damage beneath it. And certain doors opened sooner. You would have stepped in with sincerity while others nearby watched with intentions not aligned to your good. So I allowed delay. I allowed closure. I allowed confusion even when you did not understand why, because unseen arrangements were being protected beyond your sight. Some blessings remained hidden because enemies were watching. You often imagine opposition only in obvious forms, yet not every watching eye announces itself openly. There are seasons when what belongs to your future must remain covered because attention around you is not harmless. Envy watches quietly. Jealousy observes silently. Warm intentions can remain hidden behind ordinary behavior. I saw what you could not fully see. I saw who noticed your movements, who watched your vulnerabilities, who would have reacted wrongly if certain things had appeared too early. So I covered what belonged to you. I did not allow certain growth to become visible while unnecessary eyes remained near. Protection often looks like delay when viewed from earth, but from heaven it is careful covering until exposure becomes safe. This is why I tell you clearly now. I kept it where fear could not touch it, where envy could not stain it, where delay could not destroy it. What I preserve remains untouched by forces that would weaken it if exposed before time. There were also heavenly arrangements moving that you could not see. While you counted visible days, unseen arrangements continued with precision. Conversations you never heard, people you had not yet met, changes in places far from your present awareness, timings involving others whose decisions would later affect your own path. All of these moved beneath the surface while you believed nothing was happening. Heaven does not prepare by haste. I align details beyond your sight because what reaches you must fit not only your present need but also what comes after it. Some arrangements required one person to leave one place before another opening became possible for you. Some timings required one closed chapter elsewhere before a new chapter could safely arrive near you. Some answers depended on movements across distances you could never have predicted. Yet because you did not see these layers, silence felt empty when in truth unseen structures were advancing steadily. There is also divine reversal stored for you, reversal where what looked permanently delayed does not merely return but returns with greater meaning. Reversal where long discouragement gives way to clarity, where what seemed to weaken you becomes evidence of how deeply you were carried, where lost confidence returns with stronger roots than before. Divine reversal is not simple replacement. It is the turning of what once caused pain into something that reveals my wisdom even inside delayed seasons. What I reverse with purpose, not merely to compensate but to reveal that hidden preservation was never wasted time. So imagine this, my child, not an empty heaven watching passively, but a place where specific things concerning you remained carefully held, peace untouched by panic, healing untouched by old wounds, opportunity untouched by betrayal, vindication untouched by accusation, restoration untouched by fragile timing, and reversals untouched by the damage early exposure could have caused. What remained unseen was not forgotten storage but personal preparation. It was held with your name known fully, your season understood fully, and your future protected fully. And now when release comes, it does not come as scattered fragments but as what has been guarded personally, precisely, and lovingly until the hour where what was hidden can finally enter your hands without losing the strength it gained while protected. My child, this moment is not like the moments you have known before, even if at first it appears similar from the outside. You may look around and see familiar surroundings, familiar responsibilities, familiar questions still lingering at the edge of your thoughts, and because some outward things still resemble what you have already walked through, part of you may wonder whether this season is truly different or whether this is only another cycle that feels hopeful for a short time before returning to the same silence. But I tell you now with tenderness and certainty, this moment carries a different weight because you are not standing in it as the same person who stood in the earlier seasons. What once felt delayed is now approaching through a path that earlier versions of you could not have sustained. The difference is not only in what I am preparing to release. The difference is in what has already been formed within you through everything you survived before arriving here. Previous seasons were not empty stretches of waiting. They were preparation hidden beneath ordinary days, shaping capacities you did not know were developing while you simply tried to endure one day at a time. Comment your unfailing love rescued me, Jesus, if His grace has reached you. And share this video. My child, stop for a moment and do not move away from this message, because I am speaking to you now with urgency, and I need your full attention before another thought pulls you away. This is not random. This is not an ordinary moment, and this is not something placed before you by accident. I have interrupted this exact moment because something changed last night, and you must hear me before the noise of this day tries to cover what I am saying to your spirit. I know what you were doing before your eyes came here. I know what has been weighing on your chest since you woke up. I know the thoughts that have already crossed your mind today, and I know the hidden heaviness you have tried to carry quietly so no one would ask what is wrong. But I tell you now, before this day goes any further, stop and listen carefully, because heaven did not remain still while you slept. Last night was not an ordinary night around you, even if your room looked silent, even if the darkness seemed ordinary, even if you believed nothing was changing. While you thought the night was passing like every other night, something in the unseen world moved because of you. Something that had been held in silence reached a point where heaven answered. Something that you cried over when no one was watching rose before me again, and I did not ignore it. I am speaking now because there are moments when I allow quiet, and there are moments when I step forward and make my voice known so clearly that you cannot mistake it. This is one of those moments. While you were lying there, while your thoughts moved between fear and tiredness, while sleep came and left and came again, every tear you carried, even the ones that did not fall from your eyes but stayed burning inside your heart, rose before me. You may think tears only matter when they are visible, but I tell you I know the tears that never reached your face. I know the tears that stayed trapped in your chest because you were too tired to explain yourself. I know the kind of crying that happens in silence, where your breathing changes but your voice says nothing. Last night those tears reached me again with unusual weight, and heaven did not treat them lightly. Angels were already moving before the morning arrived. Commands were already being released before you opened your eyes. A decision concerning your life was already being made while the night still covered your window. What you could not see with natural eyes was not emptiness. It was movement. It was response. It was intervention. There are nights when you think nothing happened because no sound came from above. But I tell you, there are nights when the greatest battles happen where human eyes cannot reach. Last night was one of those nights. I rose for you in the unseen before this day began because I saw what was gathering. I saw what had been approaching, and I refused to allow what planned itself against you to arrive untouched. This is why I tell you this message cannot be delayed. Do not say you will return later. Do not say you will listen when your mind feels calmer. Hear me now, because what was moving against you has already been intercepted, and you must understand why this hour matters. There are moments when danger never reaches you because I stop it before it enters your day. Yet you call the day ordinary because you never saw what all must arrive. There are things I cancel before they touch your hands, before they touch your name, before they touch your peace, and because you do not always see the closed road behind you, you think nothing happened. But I tell you, something did happen. There was something building in darkness that expected your weakness. There was something hoping your tiredness would become surrender. There was something prepared to deepen what has already burdened you. But before it could fully arrive, heaven answered. Before it crossed into what concerns you, I moved. Before the morning came, I gave instruction in places you do not yet understand. This is why I am not allowing you to treat this message lightly, because direct intervention deserves direct attention. Listen carefully now, because if you stay with my words, you will begin to understand why today feels different even if everything around you still looks the same. You may have noticed something you cannot explain. Perhaps the day began with unusual heaviness but also unusual awareness. Perhaps there is a strange stillness in you that does not match the problems around you. Perhaps nothing visible has changed, yet something inside you feels as though a shift already began before your mind could name it. That is because not every change begins where human eyes can measure it. Some changes begin in silence before they appear in circumstances. Some changes begin in the spirit before they become visible in the path ahead. I often move first where no one can applaud it, where no one can immediately confirm it, because I need you to learn that my work is not dependent on what you can instantly prove. Today feels different because heaven already touched what concerns you before you rose from sleep. Today carries something yesterday did not carry. Even if your room looks the same, even if your responsibilities remain waiting, even if the messages on your phone have not changed, the unseen weight over this day is not the same as before. There is a reason you were pushed to open this now. Do not dismiss that inner pull that brought your attention here. You may think you simply arrived by habit, by timing, by routine, but I tell you there are moments I guide your hand without you understanding why, until my words begin to uncover what your heart needed most. You were not simply curious. You were drawn because I knew this exact moment would meet you while your spirit was open enough to hear what your mind has been unable to settle. I know how many times you almost moved past what I placed before you. I know how many times distraction almost took this moment away. Yet you are here because I did not allow your need to go unanswered today. I wanted this interruption because there are truths you must hear before fear speaks louder again. There are things I need planted inside you before doubt returns to argue against peace. There is a reason this reached you now and not earlier, because now your spirit is listening differently. Now your hidden questions are heavier. Now the silence inside you has become deep enough that my voice must answer directly. Type Jesus, I desperately need you if you know He's your only true answer. My child, I saw the tears no one else saw. I saw what you covered quickly when someone entered the room. I saw what you explained away when people asked if you were fine. I saw the nights when your eyes remained open longer than they should have because your mind would not rest. I saw the moments you looked strong simply because you were too tired to explain how weak you felt. I saw the prayer that had no full sentence, only breath and pain. I saw the disappointment you swallowed because you feared speaking it aloud would make it feel heavier. I saw when you tried to be normal while your heart quietly broke under things no one noticed. Do not think I only hear polished prayers. I hear what your silence says. I hear what your breathing says when sorrow sits beside you. I hear what your eyes say when you look away so no one asks another question. And because I saw those private tears, I did not remain distant. Heaven does not ignore what breaks one of my children in secret. Every hidden tear carries language in my presence. Every silent cry reaches farther than you think. Stay with me carefully because near the later part of what I am saying, I will show you exactly what was canceled and what begins immediately from this moment. I do not want you to rush ahead of my voice because understanding unfolds in order. Some things must first settle in your heart before you can fully receive what I am revealing. You have asked me what changed. You have asked why pressure became so strange recently. You have asked why heaviness came without clear reason. You have asked why certain fears tried to return even after you believed you had already overcome them. I have heard every question, and I will answer you clearly. I will show you what was stopped before arrival. I will show you what door did not close because I held it open. I will show you what assignment lost strength against you before morning came. And I will also show you what begins now, because when I remove one thing, I do not leave emptiness. I establish what must replace what was broken, delayed, threatened, or held back. This is not ordinary encouragement. This is not a soft word sent only to comfort emotion for a moment and disappear by night. This is direct intervention, and you must receive it with seriousness. I am not speaking because you merely needed comfort. I am speaking because movement has already begun around what concerns you. There are moments when my words arrive as warning, moments when they arrive as healing, and moments when they arrive because heaven has already acted and your spirit must catch up with what has begun. This is one of those moments. I need you to understand that the reason your spirit has been so restless is because unseen pressure recognized that change was near. Darkness often becomes louder when it senses that its hold is weakening. Confusion often increases when clarity is close. Weariness often deepens just before relief arrives. What you thought meant collapse was often evidence that something was already shifting beyond your sight. So remain here and listen as though heaven itself paused this hour for you, because in truth, this hour has been marked with unusual care. I have spoken over your life in silence many times, but today I am allowing you to hear what I am doing more directly. You are not abandoned. You are not forgotten. You are not standing in an unchanged place as much as you think. Last night mattered more than you know. Heaven moved more than you saw. Angels were sent more than you felt. And before this day fully unfolds, your heart must know this. What I stopped will not return with the same power. What I canceled will not complete its old assignment. and what begins now carries my authority over what tried to delay you. Stay near my voice, because what follows must be received carefully, and by the time this word settles fully inside you, you will understand why I told you not tomorrow, not later, not someday now. My child, listen carefully now, because I want you to understand what happened last night in a way you have not understood before. Those tears you carried were not ordinary tears, and what rose from your heart did not disappear into silence the way you feared. You thought you were simply enduring another night, another long hour where your thoughts became heavier than your body could carry, another moment where your chest felt tight and your mind moved through the same questions again and again. But what you called another difficult night was not ordinary in my sight. I was watching every moment, and I was not watching from far away. I was close enough to hear what you never said aloud, close enough to know why your breathing changed, close enough to understand the pain behind the silence you tried to keep under control. I know there are tears that people see and ask about, but I also know the tears you hide because you no longer know how to explain why they keep returning. Last night, even the tears that did not fully fall from your eyes were known before they formed. The pain behind them had already reached me before you even realized how tired you were becoming. You may have believed you were simply trying to survive another difficult night, but heaven was reading every unspoken sentence inside you. Nothing about your sorrow was invisible. Nothing about your exhaustion passed unnoticed. I need you to know this deeply now. Your tears were not weak, they were not ignored, and they were not ordinary. They carried the full weight of everything you have been trying to endure quietly for longer than most people understand. Every silent cry was recorded. Not one moment of inward breaking disappeared without being held before me. When your mouth stayed quiet because you were too tired to pray in full words, I still heard the language of your heart clearly. When you stared into darkness and asked questions you could not even finish, I heard them before your thoughts formed them fully. There are nights when you think silence means nothing is happening, but silence in your room does not mean silence in heaven. Every inward cry has a sound before me. Every deep sigh that leaves your chest after holding too much carries meaning in my presence. Last night was not the first time I heard you, but something about the accumulation of what you have carried reached a fullness that could no longer remain unanswered in the same way. The sorrow did not begin yesterday. The tiredness did not begin last night. The loneliness did not arrive in one single moment. It has been building through many days where you smiled while carrying things too heavy to explain, through many hours where you tried to remain steady while inwardly feeling yourself weaken, through many delayed answers that slowly taught your heart how disappointment sounds when repeated too often. I saw every layer gathering, every hidden weight adding itself to the next until your spirit began to feel tired in places words cannot easily reach. And because I saw that accumulation, last night heaven did not remain still. Comment, I live and breathe for you, Christ, if your life rests safely in His hands. What happened spiritually last night began because accumulated pain has a voice before me when my child continues carrying what no one else understands. I know the nights when loneliness feels louder than the room itself. I know what it feels like when you are surrounded by people yet still inwardly alone because no one truly sees what your heart is carrying. I know the exhaustion that comes when answers remain delayed so long that even hope begins to sound tired inside your own mind. I know emotional collapse that happens quietly, where outwardly you still move, still answer, still continue, but inwardly something feels as if it is leaning dangerously close to giving way. Last night was not simply about one moment of sadness. It was about the many moments that came before it, all gathered together before heaven. Every day you remained strong while feeling weak added itself to that moment. Every prayer you whispered and then wondered if I heard it added itself to that moment. Every disappointment you folded inward because you feared saying too much added itself to that moment. Heaven does not measure pain the way earth does. People may only notice what becomes visible, but I see what builds slowly behind your eyes long before anyone else realizes you are tired. My child, tears spoken in silence carry weight in heaven because silence does not reduce truth before me. There are tears that come with words and there are tears that come without them, but both rise clearly before my throne. Sometimes the tears you never release outwardly carry even deeper meaning because they come from places where your heart no longer has language. Last night I heard what your silence said more clearly than you realize. Your silence said you were tired of holding pain without understanding why certain answers remained distant. Your silence said you were trying not to break under pressure you no longer knew how to explain. Your silence said you were asking if I still saw you even though you did not want to sound desperate again. Your silence said you were wearied of being strong when inwardly you wanted relief. Do not think silence weakens prayer. Silence often reveals what words cannot reach. There are times when tears become prayer before a single sentence forms, and last night your tears were already speaking before your mind understood how deeply your spirit needed release. You thought perhaps nothing was happening because the room stayed quiet, because no sudden sign appeared, because no immediate answer entered your hands before sleep came again. But while earth remained silent around you, heaven remained attentive above you. My attention did not leave because the room stayed still. My care did not lessen because no immediate outward sign appeared. I remained attentive through every minute you believe you were simply enduring alone. I watched the moment you turned over trying to rest, but could not settle fully. I watched the moment your thoughts returned to the same unanswered places again. I watched the moment your strength became quiet and you said nothing because there was nothing left to explain. I was there when your eyes closed with heaviness that words could not fully describe. Heaven does not lose attention because earth gives no response. There are moments when my greatest listening happens while everything around you appears unchanged. Last night was one of those moments. While you thought another silent night had passed, I had already begun movement that your natural eyes could not yet see. You must understand this now because your heart has sometimes mistaken silence for absence. When people did not notice, when answers delayed, when circumstances remained unmoved, you quietly wondered if perhaps nothing was changing anywhere. But I tell you, many times heaven has already begun answering before earth gives visible evidence. Last night heaven was already responding while you believe you were simply lying there with your pain. I had not stepped away from your loneliness. I had not ignored your exhaustion. I had not dismissed your delayed cries because they came repeatedly. I had not turned from your emotional collapse because you did not know how to present it perfectly. My child, I do not require polished strength from you before I listen. I listen when your thoughts are scattered. I listen when your faith sounds weak. I listen when you are unsure how to ask again for what has already hurt too long. Last night I listened with the same care as the first time you cried, but heaven also moved because the weight had reached a place where intervention was already beginning. What you felt as heaviness was not proof that I had become distant. In many moments, heaviness increases because unseen movement begins pressing against what has held you too long. There are seasons when your heart senses change before your mind understands it, and that tension often feels like deeper tiredness before peace becomes visible. You wondered why your chest felt so full even when the room was empty. You wondered why your thoughts returned so strongly even when you wanted rest. You wondered why tears seemed near even when you had already promised yourself you would stay calm. It is because pain that has accumulated often rises strongest just before heaven shifts something beneath what you can see. What felt unbearable was not meaningless. What felt like another lonely night was not unobserved. Heaven had already leaned toward your pain while you believed you were simply enduring one more silent hour. I want you to remember this deeply. Earth may remain silent while heaven remains fully aware. People may not ask the right questions. People may not see the full cost of what you have carried. Even those near you may misunderstand the depth of your tiredness because some pain does not easily appear on the surface. But none of it limits my attention. I remained attentive when others moved past what you hid. I remained attentive when you answered simply because explaining felt too exhausting. I remained attentive when your strength became quiet and your hope fell thin. Last night I remained attentive while heaven recorded every hidden cry. What you thought was disappearing into darkness was already rising before me with full clarity. So do not believe that nothing happened because you saw no immediate sign. Something had already begun while your tears still rested near your eyes. Something had already shifted while your heart was still asking if this season would ever change. Something had already been heard before morning came. You were not lying in emptiness. You were not suffering inside unnoticed. Heaven was already responding before your night ended, because your tears were received. Your silence was understood. Your accumulated pain was known. And your lonely night became a moment where my attention moved closer than you realized. Last night heaven received your tears, and because heaven received them, silence is no longer what it was before. My child, I know one question has quietly lived inside you for longer than you have admitted even to yourself. You have asked me, sometimes in words and sometimes only in thought, why now? Why did this movement begin now and not before? Why did heaven remain quiet through so many nights when your heart was already tired? Why did I allow you to walk through so many hours of uncertainty before giving you this sense that something has finally shifted? I have heard that question every time it rose inside you, and I want you to understand with clarity that nothing about this timing is random, delayed by forgetfulness, or held back by indifference. Divine movement did not begin now because I suddenly noticed you. It began now because the appointed fullness of this moment has been reached. I was watching every stage before this one, and I knew exactly when the hidden line would be crossed, the line where preparation would become action, where what had been forming unseen would finally begin to move in a way your spirit could feel. What you call delay was never absence. What you call silence was never neglect. I was measuring what you could not measure, watching what you could not yet understand, allowing certain things to continue only until their purpose became complete. There are moments when I move suddenly, and there are moments when I wait because what is unfinished beneath the surface cannot yet carry what is coming. You saw only the burden, but I also saw the unfinished shaping beneath the burden. You felt only the pressure, but I saw the strength beating formed beneath pressure that you did not yet recognize as strength. If I had risen earlier in the way you wanted, some things inside you would have remained unprepared for what follows after relief arrives. Many ask for immediate rescue, but I also govern what comes after rescue. I do not only answer pain, I also prepare the soul that must carry the answer. This is why divine movement often seems late to human eyes while remaining exact in heaven. You counted days by fatigue. I counted hidden growth by truth. You counted nights by tears. I counted how much endurance had been formed without your own awareness. You believe that perhaps the answer should have arrived when the pain first became sharp. but I knew that what was beginning then had not yet completed its hidden work. Timing has now reached fullness, because the burden you carried became complete before heaven acted openly. There is a point when pain reaches its full testimony before me, when every layer of what has been endured gathers into one clear cry before heaven, and that point cannot be forced early nor delayed beyond its appointed hour. Your burden was not ignored while it built. Every disappointment added to the record. Every lonely night added to the record. Every delayed answer added to the record. Every time you chose to continue while inwardly feeling weaker than before added to the record. Heaven saw not only isolated moments but the entire wake form over time. Last night was not important because of one single tear alone. It was important because the burden had reached completion in a way only heaven fully understood. What you felt as exhaustion was not only today's pain. It was accumulated weight arriving at its threshold. And when that threshold was reached, restraint no longer remained in the same form. Certain battles are allowed only until purpose is complete. I need you to hear this deeply because many of the battles you thought were never endless in my design. There are struggles that continue only until they have produced what they were permitted to shape. Not every battle is removed at first discomfort because some battles expose what peace alone would never reveal. Some battles uncover hidden fears, hidden strengths, hidden questions, hidden loyalties, hidden dependence, and hidden endurance. What you call long struggle often contains lessons that cannot be learned in immediate comfort. But I never allow a battle to continue beyond the boundary of purpose. I know the exact moment when pressure has taught what it was allowed to teach. I know the exact moment when endurance has reached maturity enough to carry what follows. I know the exact moment when sorrow has already spoken enough and no longer needs to remain in the same way. Your battle was not left without limit. It remained only until purpose matured beneath what you could see. Type heaven is my forever home if your eyes stay fixed on eternity's promise. You wondered many times if your endurance meant nothing because relief delayed itself beyond what you expected. But your endurance reached a holy threshold. There is an unseen point where continuing one more day while still holding even a small thread of trust becomes deeply weighty before heaven. You may not have called it holy because to you it felt like surviving tiredly, but heaven sees endurance differently. Every time you continued when discouragement whispered louder than hope, something sacred was being formed. Every time you did not completely abandon prayer, even when prayer became only breath and silence, something holy was being counted. Every time you rose into another day while still carrying unanswered questions, heaven marked that endurance carefully. Holy thresholds are not always dramatic moments. Often they are reached quietly, through repeated faithfulness when no visible reward appears yet. Your spirit crossed such a threshold without fully knowing it. What seemed ordinary survival to you was becoming holy endurance before me. The delay had a reason, and much of that reason remained hidden because hidden preparation must happen where human impatience cannot interfere. I was preparing not only events around you but also depth within you. If I had lifted the burden before hidden preparation completed, you would have stepped into relief carrying pieces of yourself that were not yet ready for what follows this season. Hidden preparation includes things you never notice while they are happening. It includes how your spirit learned to discern deeper than before. It includes how certain voices lost influence because pain exposed their emptiness. It includes how certain attachments weakened because long waiting showed you what cannot truly sustain you. It includes how your prayers changed from rushed requests into deeper searching, even if you did not realize that shift while it happened. Hidden preparation also includes what was moving outside your sight, people being repositioned, closed roads remaining closed for protection, unseen interference being restrained until the right hour, future doors held until timing matched your readiness. You often saw only the part that hurt, but hidden preparation means heaven was never inactive during your delay. I was not pausing because nothing was happening. I was building what could not yet be shown. Some answers cannot arrive while the heart still clings to what must first loosen. Some openings cannot come while hidden dangers still stand where you cannot detect them. Some movements must wait until what surrounds you has shifted enough to carry them safely. That is why delay often feels empty while actually being full of unseen labor. Heaven was active in silence more than you knew. The restraint you interpreted as distance was often protection holding back what was not yet aligned. Now I reveal to you clearly, restraint has ended in this present hour in a way different from before. What was held under restraint because purpose had not yet completed is no longer being held the same way. The season where certain pressures remained untouched because hidden work was unfinished has changed. This does not mean every visible answer appears in one instant, but it does mean the restraint governing this stage has shifted. The line has been crossed. The threshold has been reached. The burden has spoken fully enough before heaven that movement now enters differently. What had to remain restrained for preparation is no longer restrained by the same requirement. My child, understand this carefully. I did not rise now because your pain finally became visible to me. I rose now because what needed to mature beneath pain has reached fullness. What had to complete itself inwardly has completed enough for new movement to begin. This is why something in your spirit feels different even if your surroundings still appear familiar. You are sensing the end of restraint before your eyes fully understand what has changed. The heaviness that once sat without movement now begins losing its old authority because the season governing it has shifted. The battle was never allowed to define you forever. It was allowed until purpose became complete. The waiting was never punishment. It was hidden preparation. The silence was never abandonment. It was measured restraint. And now that restraint has ended in the form it once held, you must not interpret the coming days through old fear. The same silence that once felt heavy will no longer carry the same meaning, because beneath what you can see, heaven has already moved from watching hidden completion into releasing what comes next. So when you ask why now, hear me clearly. Now because fullness has arrived. Now because endurance reached its holy threshold. Now because the burden completed its testimony. Now because hidden preparation is no longer unfinished. Now because restraint has ended. And now because I never intended the old weight to remain one moment beyond the point where purpose was fulfilled. My child, while your eyes were closing and your body was trying to rest, the night around you was not as still as it seemed. What looked like silence in your room was not silence in the unseen places where battles were unfolding concerning your life. The darkness around your bed looked ordinary. The walls looked unchanged. The air around you seemed quiet, yet beyond what your natural eyes could detect, movement had already begun. There are nights when heaven watches quietly, and there are nights when heaven answers with force even while earth hears nothing. Last night was not an ordinary night of waiting. It became a night of confrontation. It became a night where what had been circling quietly around your weakness was suddenly met by my command before it could move closer. You may have thought you were simply tired, simply turning from one side to another, simply trying to calm thoughts that refused to settle. But while you were fighting for rest, another kind of conflict had already begun beyond what you could hear. I need you to understand this because many times you believe your hardest moments are empty, when in truth, they are filled with unseen decisions that affect what reaches you and what never arrives. As you slept, even in broken sleep, angels were assigned with purpose. They were not sent without instruction, and they were not sent late. Before the night had fully deepened, before the heaviness in your chest settled into silence, heaven had already spoken concerning you. There are moments when I allow my child to sleep while I handle what they could never fight by their own strength. Last night was one of those moments. You did not need to know every movement because fear would have tried to interpret what only trust should receive. But now I tell you clearly, you were not alone in that room, even when loneliness tried to convince you that no one remained near. My angels moved according to my word. They moved where pressure had been gathering. They moved where unseen voices had hoped your exhaustion would open a door. They moved where silent darkness believed your weariness had made you vulnerable. They stood where you could not stand because you were tired. They answered where your strength could not answer because your spirit was worn thin. Heaven did not wait for morning to begin responding. Write, Jesus, be glorified in every part of me if your life has become his altar. And share this video.